Hello, my name is Biraba. I'm going to talk about the final critical learning repression of virtualization of enterprise system administrator. This is the process in my presentation, what I learned, the notebook I made, and conclusion. I would like to start talking about the technology of IT disaster recovery. First, I learned what is a IT disaster recovery plan. An IT disaster recovery plan is a document that explains the policy of a step-by-step procedure and responsibility to recover organizational IT system and data, and get IT operation backup and running when disaster happen. In disaster recovery, we need to decide the IPO and ITO. This is the ITO and IPO image. Essentially, IPO has to do with backup frequency, while ITO relates to the recovery timeline. IPO is a measure of how frequency you take backup. ITO is the amount of downtime a business can tolerate. Next, how to calculate ITO and IPO. This table is showing ITO factors and IPO factors. Nobody can predict a disaster. However, we could act organized if we created the best IT disaster recovery plan. When facing such an incident, IPO and ITO value may vary across different companies, but at all times will be compromised between business needs for availability and required investment in IT. Deploying a two-node clustered file server. A failover cluster is a group of independent computers that work together to increase the availability of application and service. The cluster servers are connected by physical cables and by software. If one of the cluster nodes fails, another node begins to provide the service. This kind of process is known as failover. User experience a minimum of disruption in service. I created two-node file server for final case study. The first image showed the two-node failover cluster connected to a storage unit. A failover cluster usually includes a storage unit that is physically connected to all the servers in the cluster. Although any given volume in the storage is only accessed by one server at a time. The second image is the deployment of a two-node file server cluster for final case study presentation. The files being shared are on the cluster storage, and each cluster server can act as the file server that share them. Next, Hyper-V failover cluster. In the final case study, I was not able to implement the Hyper-V failover cluster. However, I created Hyper-V failover clustering at home like the right topology. I'm going to show the video of my Hyper-V failover clustering next presentation. So this is my Hyper-V failover clustering topology. I attached 3 virtual disks on the node server, each node server, and I created a virtual machine on node servers for the Hyper. I'm going to show my Hyper-V failover clustering. I created 3 virtual machines. One is a domain controller, others are node 1, node 2 server. Let's look at the setting of a node server. I attached 3 hard drive on each node server. The attached hard disk are using storage space direct. Storage space direct use the industry standard server with local attached drive to create high available, high scalable, software-defined storage at a fraction of the cost of traditional SAN or NAS array. Let's look at the domain controller. I have two node 1, node 2 server, which is domain joined, and I created one clusters and scale file server. And let's look at the node 1. So this is the cluster manager. So let's look at the nodes. So node 1, node 2 is connected for failover cluster, and I have a disk. This is a file server. So also I have the storage pool. So this storage pool include the 6 attached hard disk. Look at this. And also I have a row of a file server and 2 virtual disk. So this virtual machine is for activated for failover cluster. So I'm using the this failover cluster Hyper-V by the Hyper-V manager. So 1, 2. So when I turn off the node 01 server, these 2 Hyper-V hard disk is moving to the node 2 server. So it when one among the 2 node server, one server is died, the other server activated to saving the all the data. So that's my Hyper-V failover clustering. Next, Hyper-V Replica. Hyper-V Replica contribute to our disaster recovery strategy by replicating virtual machine from one Hyper-V host server to another to keep our workload available. Hyper-V Replica creates a copy of a live virtual machine to a replica offline virtual machine. What is the difference between the Hyper-V Replica and Hyper-V clustering? The biggest advantage to building a cluster is that clustering allows Hyper-V VMs to failover automatically in the event that something happened to a host server. In contrast, Hyper-V replication requires each replica host to have its own storage. Virtual machines are replicated asynchronously. Last, Nola introduced us various Azure cloud service provided by Microsoft. This image shows Microsoft Azure Infrastructure as a Service, storage, and networking infrastructure. This Azure Virtual Network is a cloud service. In general, Azure Virtual Network are used to secure development and deployment environment with any kind of network attacks and data leaks. Virtual machine, web apps, a database, load balancer, etc. Should always be kept inside the virtual network. With Azure, it is very easy to create and configure highly secure private network with the help of network security group. Also, virtual networking enables communication between multiple computers, virtual machines, and virtual server or other devices across different office and data center locations. If we use this Azure Virtual Network, we are able to reduce the number of network hardware, cabling, switching, through shifting many functions to software and reduce the cost and complexity of managing network hardware and software through centralized control. The node block I made in this class. Several try to deploy a true node cluster file server because there are so many ways to deploy. Finally, I found the best deployment of failover clustering. These images show the errors when I created failover clustering. Also, I do not fully understand how to utilize the Microsoft Azure cloud service until now. So maybe if I have a time, I need to study more. Conclusion. What I learned from this program is to understand Microsoft technology for disaster recovery, such as to node cluster file server, Hyper-V failover cluster, Hyper-V replica, and try to deploy the standard failover cluster using virtual machine and near gears. Finally, what I learned is the utility of Microsoft Azure cloud service, such as deploying a website and with Azure virtual machine, implement network security in Azure development and operations. What I have to do for my future is to practice various technology for disaster recovery and understand the process of Microsoft Azure cloud service and practice how to utilize them. Thank you.